Question 1. The assessment process reveals that a significant number of applicants for the Addis College entrance exam have submitted essays that appear to have been heavily influenced by external sources, raising concerns about academic integrity. Which of the following represents the most appropriate response to this situation? Option A. Issue a general warning to all applicants about the importance of academic integrity and the consequences of plagiarism, without further investigation into individual cases. Option B. Focus solely on the content and quality of the essays, assuming that any external influence is a natural part of the learning process for applicants. Option C. Disqualify all applicants whose essays show any similarity to external sources, regardless of the extent or nature of the similarity. Option D. Implement a thorough review process for all submitted essays, cross-referencing them with known academic databases and requiring applicants to provide detailed explanations of their research and writing process for any flagged submissions. The correct answer is D. Implement a thorough review process for all submitted essays, cross-referencing them with known academic databases and requiring applicants to provide detailed explanations of their research and writing process for any flagged submissions. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in academic integrity: the subtle line between legitimate collaboration and academic misconduct. Students often struggle to understand the boundaries of acceptable assistance, especially when faced with demanding coursework. This scenario requires careful judgment to uphold the principles of academic honesty, which are fundamental to the educational mission of Addis College. The correct approach involves clearly defining and communicating the expectations for academic work, providing students with resources to understand what constitutes plagiarism and improper collaboration, and implementing a fair and consistent process for addressing suspected violations. This aligns with the Addis College entrance exam's emphasis on assessing a student's foundational understanding and ethical disposition. Specifically, the college's guidelines, as reflected in the entrance exam structure, prioritize independent thought and the demonstration of individual learning. Therefore, any approach that encourages or condones the submission of work that is not the student's own, or that misrepresents the extent of external assistance, directly contravenes these principles. An incorrect approach would be to ignore or downplay instances of suspected academic misconduct. Failure to act undermines the integrity of the assessment process and sends a message that academic honesty is not a priority. It also fails to provide students with the necessary feedback to correct their behavior, potentially leading to more serious issues in their academic careers. Another incorrect approach is to apply punitive measures without a clear understanding of the student's intent or the specific guidelines. This can lead to unfair outcomes and damage the student's trust in the institution. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on automated detection tools without human review and judgment. While these tools can be helpful, they cannot fully account for context or intent, and their findings must be corroborated through a thorough investigation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the relevant academic policies and ethical guidelines. This involves proactive education of students on academic integrity, followed by a fair and transparent investigation process when suspected violations occur. The focus should always be on fostering an environment of academic honesty and providing students with opportunities to learn from their mistakes, while also ensuring the integrity of the assessment. Question 2. The assessment process reveals that a candidate has a strong command of historical dates and names, but struggles to explain the causal relationships between significant events. Which evaluation strategy best reflects the Addis College entrance exam's goal of identifying students prepared for critical academic inquiry? Option A. Include essay questions that ask the candidate to list as many battles as possible from a particular war. Option B. Assess the candidate's ability to recite the sequence of monarchs in a given historical period. Option C. Prioritize questions that require the candidate to analyze primary source documents and explain the motivations behind historical actions. Option D. Focus on multiple-choice questions that test recall of specific historical figures and their birth dates. The correct answer is C. Prioritize questions that require the candidate to analyze primary source documents and explain the motivations behind historical actions. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a candidate's understanding of foundational academic principles relevant to higher education. The challenge lies in evaluating not just factual recall, but the ability to apply knowledge within a specific context, adhering to established academic integrity standards. This requires careful judgment to distinguish between genuine understanding and superficial memorization, and to ensure that the assessment accurately reflects the candidate's preparedness for college-level study. The correct approach involves a comprehensive evaluation that considers multiple facets of a candidate's academic profile. This includes assessing their grasp of core concepts, their ability to articulate ideas clearly, and their adherence to academic honesty. Specifically, the correct approach would focus on questions that require critical thinking and application of learned material, rather than rote memorization. This aligns with the Addis College entrance exam's objective to identify students capable of engaging with complex academic material and contributing meaningfully to the college community. The emphasis on understanding and application, as opposed to mere factual recall, is paramount for ensuring that admitted students possess the intellectual capacity for success. An incorrect approach that relies solely on memorization of facts without assessing comprehension would fail to identify candidates with true academic potential. This is professionally unacceptable because it misrepresents the candidate's readiness for college-level work and undermines the integrity of the admissions process. Another incorrect approach that overlooks the importance of academic integrity, such as allowing plagiarism or misrepresentation of work, is also professionally unacceptable. This directly violates the ethical standards expected of any educational institution and compromises the fairness of the assessment. A third incorrect approach that focuses on irrelevant or overly specialized knowledge, divorced from the general academic requirements of a college entrance exam, would also be a failure. This is because it does not accurately measure the foundational knowledge and skills necessary for a broad range of college disciplines. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the assessment's objectives, a commitment to fairness and academic integrity, and the use of evaluation methods that accurately measure the desired competencies. This includes designing questions that promote critical thinking and application, establishing clear guidelines for academic honesty, and ensuring that all candidates are evaluated on the same objective criteria. Question 3. Examination of the data shows that a prospective student applying for the Addis College entrance exam has a strong academic record, but is missing a specific prerequisite document that is listed as mandatory for all applicants. The student is aware of this deficiency and is considering submitting a slightly altered version of a related document to appear as if the mandatory document has been provided, or alternatively, to contact the admissions office to explain the situation and inquire about a potential waiver or alternative pathway. Option A. Contact the admissions office to explain the situation and inquire about a potential waiver or alternative pathway. Option B. Submit a slightly altered version of a related document to appear as if the mandatory document has been provided. Option C. Withdraw the application due to the inability to meet all mandatory requirements. Option D. Request a friend who has already successfully completed the entrance exam to submit the application on their behalf. The correct answer is B. Submit a slightly altered version of a related document to appear as if the mandatory document has been provided. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire for academic advancement and the college's commitment to academic integrity and fair assessment. The Addis College entrance exam regulations, as a governing framework for admissions, mandate that all applicants undergo a standardized and equitable evaluation process. Misrepresenting qualifications or attempting to bypass established procedures undermines this core principle. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to the stated admission requirements and providing truthful and verifiable documentation. This aligns with the ethical obligation of honesty and transparency expected of all individuals interacting with educational institutions. Specifically, the Addis College entrance exam guidelines emphasize the importance of accurate self-reporting and the submission of genuine academic records. By following this approach, the applicant respects the integrity of the examination process and demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct, which are foundational values for any academic community. An incorrect approach would be to submit falsified documents or to claim qualifications not genuinely possessed. This directly violates the principles of academic honesty and the specific regulations of the Addis College entrance exam, which implicitly or explicitly prohibit fraudulent applications. Such actions erode trust in the admission system and can lead to severe consequences, including immediate disqualification and potential blacklisting from future academic pursuits. Another incorrect approach would be to seek an unfair advantage through unauthorized means, such as attempting to bribe or unduly influence admissions officers. This not only contravenes ethical standards, but also likely violates specific disciplinary codes of conduct for both applicant and college staff, undermining the fairness and impartiality of the entire selection process. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes adherence to established rules and ethical principles. This involves a clear understanding of the relevant regulations, a commitment to honesty, and a willingness to seek clarification or guidance when faced with ambiguity. The process should involve evaluating the potential consequences of each action, not just for the individual, but for the institution and the broader academic community. Question 4. Assessment of the appropriate response by an academic advisor at Addis College when a prospective student inquires about obtaining past examination papers for preparation. Option A. Suggest that the student try to find past papers through unofficial channels or former students who may have retained them. Option B. Recommend that the student focus exclusively on textbook material and ignore any specific rules about past examination papers, as they are generally not provided. Option C. Provide the student with a set of past examination papers, explaining that they are for practice purposes only and should not be shared. Option D. Advise the student that accessing or using past examination papers is strictly prohibited by Addis College entrance exam regulations and suggest alternative, authorized study resources. The correct answer is D. Advise the student that accessing or using past examination papers is strictly prohibited by Addis College entrance exam regulations and suggest alternative, authorized study resources. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in academic settings where students may seek to leverage existing knowledge or resources in ways that could be construed as academic misconduct. The challenge lies in distinguishing between legitimate academic inquiry and actions that violate the principles of academic integrity, particularly concerning the use of past examination materials. Addis College entrance exam regulations are designed to ensure a fair and equitable assessment for all candidates, and any deviation from these principles undermines the validity of the examination process. The professional challenge is to uphold these standards while also guiding students towards ethical academic practices. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves advising the student that accessing or using past examination papers, even for preparation, is strictly prohibited by Addis College entrance exam regulations. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the established rules designed to maintain the integrity and fairness of the entrance examination. The regulations implicitly or explicitly prohibit the use of any unauthorized materials or prior knowledge of examination content. By informing the student of this prohibition, the advisor upholds the ethical obligation to ensure a level playing field for all applicants and to prevent any form of academic dishonesty. This aligns with the principle of fairness and the requirement for all candidates to demonstrate their knowledge and abilities independently. Incorrect approaches analysis. Providing the student with past examination papers, even with a disclaimer, is incorrect because it directly facilitates a violation of the examination regulations. This action compromises the integrity of the assessment process and is unethical, as it grants an unfair advantage to one student over others. It also demonstrates a failure to uphold the professional responsibility of an advisor to guide students towards ethical conduct. Suggesting the student seek out unofficial sources for past papers is also incorrect. While not directly providing the papers, this approach implicitly condones and encourages the student to engage in potentially illicit activities. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to upholding the college's academic standards and could lead to the student obtaining materials that are not only prohibited but potentially inaccurate or misleading, further undermining their preparation and the examination's purpose. Encouraging the student to rely solely on textbook knowledge without acknowledging the specific rules regarding examination materials is an incomplete approach. While textbook knowledge is fundamental, the prohibition on past papers is a specific rule of the Addis College entrance exam. Ignoring this specific rule leaves the student vulnerable to inadvertently violating regulations and it fails to provide comprehensive guidance on acceptable preparation methods within the context of the exam's framework. Professional reasoning. Professionals in academic advisory roles must prioritize adherence to institutional regulations and ethical principles. The decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the core issue, potential academic misconduct. 2. Consulting relevant regulations, understanding the specific rules of the Addis College entrance exam regarding preparation materials. 3. Applying ethical principles, ensuring fairness, integrity, and honesty in the assessment process. 4. Communicating clearly and directly, informing the student of the rules and acceptable practices. 5. Providing constructive guidance, suggesting legitimate and ethical study methods that align with the exam's requirements. Question 5. Which approach would be most appropriate for the admissions committee at Addis College when verifying the authenticity of academic transcripts and reference letters submitted by prospective students, given the need for timely processing, but also the importance of applicant privacy? Option A. Implementing a systematic verification process that involves cross-referencing submitted documents with official records and obtaining applicant consent for any external inquiries. Option B. Relying solely on the applicant's self-reported information and assuming its accuracy to expedite the process. Option C. Directly contacting referees and previous institutions to confirm details without informing the applicant beforehand. Option D. Prioritizing speed by accepting photocopies of transcripts and references without seeking official confirmation. The correct answer is C. Directly contacting referees and previous institutions to confirm details without informing the applicant beforehand. Explanation. This scenario presents a challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect applicant privacy. The Addis College entrance exam framework, while focused on assessing academic readiness, implicitly upholds principles of fairness and data protection, which are foundational to any educational institution's admissions process. The pressure to admit qualified students quickly must not override the fundamental right to privacy and the integrity of the application process. The best approach involves a structured, transparent, and compliant method of verifying information. This means adhering strictly to the established procedures for document verification, which are designed to ensure accuracy without infringing on privacy rights. This approach prioritizes the integrity of the admissions process and upholds the trust placed in the college by applicants. It aligns with the implicit regulatory expectation that educational institutions will handle applicant data responsibly and ethically. An approach that involves directly contacting referees without prior consent from the applicant is ethically problematic and potentially violates privacy expectations. While the intention might be to expedite verification, it bypasses the applicant's control over their personal information and the disclosure of references. This could lead to a breach of trust and potentially contravene unwritten ethical guidelines regarding candidate information. Another incorrect approach would be to accept information at face value without any verification, even if it seems plausible. This undermines the integrity of the admissions process and could lead to unqualified candidates being admitted, which is detrimental to the academic standards of Addis College. It fails to meet the basic due diligence expected in any selection process. Finally, an approach that involves making assumptions about an applicant's qualifications based on incomplete or unverified information is also professionally unsound. This introduces bias and subjectivity into the admissions decision, moving away from an objective assessment based on verifiable evidence. It fails to uphold the principle of fair evaluation for all candidates. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the college's admissions policies and any relevant ethical guidelines concerning applicant data. When faced with a need for verification, professionals should always consult established procedures. If procedures are unclear or insufficient, seeking guidance from admissions leadership or relevant administrative bodies is crucial. The paramount consideration should be to uphold the integrity of the admissions process while respecting the privacy and rights of the applicants. Question 6. Implementation of a comprehensive study plan that exclusively utilizes officially provided study materials and past examination papers released by Addis College without seeking any external or unauthorized aids is the most appropriate method for a candidate preparing for the Addis College entrance exam. Option A. Accessing and reviewing leaked examination questions from previous years that are being circulated on social media platforms. Option B. Purchasing a study guide from a private tutoring service that claims to have insider information about the exam content. Option C. Relying solely on officially provided study materials and past examination papers released by Addis College without seeking any external or unauthorized aids. Option D. Collaborating with other prospective candidates to share insights and potential exam topics based on unofficial rumors circulating online. The correct answer is C. Relying solely on officially provided study materials and past examination papers released by Addis College without seeking any external or unauthorized aids. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the ethical and regulatory landscape of academic integrity within the context of a university entrance exam. The pressure to perform well, coupled with the availability of potentially unauthorized assistance, creates a situation where upholding ethical standards is paramount. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate preparation and academic misconduct. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to the guidelines provided by Addis College for its entrance examination. This means relying solely on one's own knowledge and understanding, without any external aids or assistance that are not explicitly permitted. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant with the regulations governing university entrance examinations, which are designed to ensure a fair and equitable assessment of all candidates' abilities. By preparing thoroughly and engaging with the material independently, the candidate demonstrates integrity and respect for the examination process. An incorrect approach would be to seek or utilize unauthorized assistance, such as obtaining exam questions in advance or receiving answers during the exam. This constitutes academic dishonesty, which is a direct violation of the Addis College entrance exam regulations and general academic ethical principles. Such actions undermine the validity of the examination, create an unfair advantage over other candidates, and can lead to severe penalties, including disqualification from the exam and potential future academic repercussions. Another incorrect approach would be to misrepresent one's qualifications or background to gain an advantage, as this also violates the principles of honesty and integrity expected in academic settings. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the rules and regulations governing the assessment. Candidates should prioritize honesty and integrity, recognizing that the purpose of an entrance exam is to gauge their genuine capabilities. If faced with an opportunity for unfair advantage, the professional response is to decline it and report any observed irregularities to the appropriate authorities, thereby upholding the integrity of the academic process. Question 7. The efficiency study reveals that a significant bottleneck in the Addis College admissions process is the time spent reviewing applications, leading to delays in offering admission. The study recommends streamlining the initial screening by prioritizing applicants with the highest secondary school leaving certificate scores to expedite the process. However, the admissions committee is concerned that this might overlook promising candidates from diverse backgrounds who may not have achieved top scores but possess strong potential demonstrated through other means. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for efficiency with the principles of fair and equitable admissions? Option A. Strictly adhere to the efficiency study's recommendation by only considering applicants whose secondary school leaving certificate scores fall within the top 10% of all applicants for further review. Option B. Implement a tiered review system where applicants with exceptionally high scores are fast-tracked, while those with strong but not top-tier scores undergo a more comprehensive review that includes assessment of extracurricular achievements and personal statements. Option C. Introduce a new, complex scoring rubric for all applicants that attempts to quantify various attributes, but without a clear methodology for weighting these attributes, leading to subjective evaluations. Option D. Disregard the efficiency study's findings entirely and continue with the existing, time-consuming admissions process to ensure no potential candidate is overlooked. The correct answer is B. Implement a tiered review system where applicants with exceptionally high scores are fast-tracked, while those with strong but not top-tier scores undergo a more comprehensive review that includes assessment of extracurricular achievements and personal statements. Explanation: The scenario presents a challenge for Addis College admissions officers, who must balance the stated goals of an efficiency study with the ethical and regulatory obligations of fair and equitable admissions. The efficiency study's recommendation to prioritize candidates with higher secondary school leaving certificate scores, while seemingly straightforward for streamlining the process, could inadvertently disadvantage students from less resourced secondary schools or those who excel in areas not solely captured by a single numerical score. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and implementing the study's findings without violating principles of fairness, non-discrimination, and adherence to the Addis College's own stated admission policies, which may encompass broader criteria than just academic scores. Careful judgment is required to ensure that efficiency gains do not come at the cost of equity and opportunity for a diverse applicant pool. The correct approach involves a nuanced implementation of the efficiency study's findings. This means acknowledging the study's recommendation to consider secondary school leaving certificate scores as a factor, but critically evaluating its weight and ensuring it does not become the sole or overwhelmingly dominant criterion. This approach aligns with best professional practice by seeking to improve operational efficiency while upholding ethical principles of fairness and equity. It involves a commitment to a holistic review process that considers multiple dimensions of a candidate's potential, such as extracurricular activities, personal statements, and potentially interviews, especially for borderline cases or when scores might not fully reflect a student's capabilities. This aligns with the implicit ethical duty of educational institutions to provide opportunities based on merit and potential, rather than solely on easily quantifiable metrics that may reflect socioeconomic disparities. An approach that solely prioritizes candidates with the highest secondary school leaving certificate scores, as suggested by a literal interpretation of the efficiency study, is professionally unacceptable. This fails to consider the diverse backgrounds of applicants and the potential for systemic biases in scoring. It risks excluding capable students who may have faced greater challenges in their secondary education or whose strengths lie in areas not directly measured by the certificate. This approach violates the ethical principle of equal opportunity and could lead to discriminatory outcomes, potentially contravening any internal Addis College policies that advocate for a broader assessment of candidates. Another incorrect approach would be to completely disregard the efficiency study's findings and continue with the previous, potentially less efficient, admissions process without any modification. While this avoids the pitfalls of a purely score-based system, it fails to address the identified inefficiencies. Professionals have a responsibility to contribute to the improvement of their institution's operations where possible, provided such improvements do not compromise ethical standards. Ignoring the study entirely represents a missed opportunity for constructive change and could be seen as a failure to engage with institutional improvement initiatives. Finally, an approach that attempts to implement the efficiency study's recommendations by creating arbitrary cutoff scores without further review or consideration of other factors would also be flawed. This is a superficial application of efficiency that lacks professional judgment and ethical consideration. It fails to recognize that numerical scores are not always perfect indicators of a student's suitability for higher education and can perpetuate inequities. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a critical assessment of any proposed efficiency measures. This includes understanding the potential benefits and drawbacks, particularly concerning ethical implications and adherence to institutional policies. Professionals should advocate for solutions that balance efficiency with fairness, equity, and a commitment to a holistic evaluation of candidates. This often involves seeking clarification, proposing modifications to recommendations, and ensuring that any implemented changes are regularly reviewed for their impact on the applicant pool and the institution's commitment to diversity and inclusion. Question 8. During the evaluation of an applicant's submission for the Addis College entrance exam, an evaluator notices a significant overlap in content and phrasing between the applicant's essay and a publicly available online article. The similarity is substantial enough to raise concerns about potential plagiarism. What is the most appropriate course of action for the evaluator? Option A. Directly discuss the observed similarities with the applicant. Explain the college's policy on academic integrity and offer guidance on how to properly cite sources or revise the work to ensure originality. Option B. Immediately disqualify the applicant based on the suspicion of plagiarism without further investigation or communication. Option C. Disregard the observed similarities, assuming the applicant may have been influenced by the online article without direct copying, and proceed with the evaluation. Option D. Report the suspected plagiarism to the college's admissions committee without speaking to the applicant first. The correct answer is A. Directly discuss the observed similarities with the applicant, explain the college's policy on academic integrity, and offer guidance on how to properly cite sources or revise the work to ensure originality. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of the foundational principles of academic integrity and ethical conduct expected of students at Addis College. The challenge lies in discerning between genuine academic effort and actions that constitute plagiarism or academic dishonesty, which are serious offenses with significant consequences. Careful judgment is required to identify the most appropriate and ethical response when faced with potential academic misconduct. The correct approach involves recognizing that the primary responsibility for academic integrity rests with the student. Therefore, the most ethical and professionally sound action is to directly address the issue with the student, explaining the college's policies on plagiarism and academic honesty, and offering support for them to correct their work. This approach upholds the principles of fairness, education, and due process. It aligns with the Addis College entrance exam's likely emphasis on fostering an environment of academic rigor and ethical scholarship. By directly engaging the student, the evaluator provides an opportunity for learning and correction, rather than immediate punitive action, which is often a more constructive first step in an educational setting. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the observed similarity, as this fails to uphold the college's commitment to academic integrity and could inadvertently allow academic dishonesty to pass unnoticed. This inaction undermines the fairness of the evaluation process for all applicants. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately disqualify the applicant without any attempt at communication or clarification. While plagiarism is a serious offense, an educational institution typically aims to educate and guide students. A punitive, immediate disqualification without due process or an opportunity for the student to explain or rectify the situation is often considered overly harsh and contrary to the spirit of academic development. It bypasses the opportunity to understand the context of the similarity, which might range from unintentional overlap to deliberate copying. A further incorrect approach would be to report the suspected plagiarism to a higher authority without first attempting to understand the situation directly with the student. While escalation might be necessary in some cases, bypassing the initial, direct communication step can be seen as an overreaction and a failure to engage in a constructive dialogue that could resolve the issue at a more fundamental level. It also deprives the student of the chance to learn from their mistake through direct feedback. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a commitment to fairness, transparency, and educational principles. It requires an initial assessment of the evidence, followed by direct, respectful communication with the individual involved. The goal should be to understand the situation, educate the individual about relevant policies, and provide an opportunity for correction or explanation before resorting to more severe measures. This iterative process ensures that decisions are well-informed and aligned with the institution's values. Question 9. System analysis indicates that prospective students are seeking clarification on the nature of the Addis College entrance exam, specifically regarding the types of preparatory materials that are permissible for study. A faculty member is concerned about how to respond to these inquiries to ensure academic integrity is maintained while providing helpful guidance. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of fair and ethical academic assessment for a university entrance exam? Option A. Provide students with a comprehensive list of topics covered in the exam and general study strategies, while explicitly stating that no specific questions or answer keys will be shared, and emphasizing the importance of independent preparation. Option B. Advise students to form study groups and collaborate extensively on practice problems that are designed to replicate the exact structure and content of the entrance exam. Option C. Share sample questions that are very similar in format and difficulty to those expected in the actual exam, along with detailed explanations of how to arrive at the correct answers. Option D. Direct students to unofficial online forums where they can find leaked past exam papers and discuss them with other applicants. The correct answer is A. Provide students with a comprehensive list of topics covered in the exam and general study strategies, while explicitly stating that no specific questions or answer keys will be shared, and emphasizing the importance of independent preparation. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in academic settings, where students may seek to leverage existing knowledge or resources in ways that could be construed as academic misconduct. The professional challenge lies in upholding the integrity of the academic assessment process, while providing fair and appropriate guidance to students. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate study aids and prohibited forms of assistance. The correct approach involves clearly communicating the examination rules and expectations regarding the use of external materials and collaboration. This aligns with the Addis College entrance exam's regulatory framework, which implicitly or explicitly prohibits plagiarism, cheating, and unauthorized assistance. By providing clear guidelines and emphasizing the importance of independent work, the institution upholds academic integrity and ensures a fair evaluation of each student's knowledge. This approach is ethically sound as it promotes honesty and fairness. An incorrect approach that involves providing students with direct answers or solutions to potential exam questions would be a severe violation of academic integrity. This would undermine the purpose of the entrance exam, which is to assess individual aptitude and knowledge. Such an action would be contrary to the principles of fair assessment and could lead to the admission of unqualified candidates, thereby damaging the reputation of Addis College. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring student inquiries about the exam content, while seemingly neutral, fails to provide necessary clarity and guidance. While not as egregious as providing answers, it can lead to student anxiety and potential unintentional breaches of rules due to misunderstanding. A proactive and clear communication strategy is a hallmark of responsible academic administration. A further incorrect approach, such as allowing students to collaborate on practice materials that closely mimic exam questions without explicit instruction on the boundaries of collaboration, also poses a risk. While collaboration can be beneficial for learning, if it blurs the line into shared work on assessment-like tasks without clear boundaries, it can inadvertently foster an environment where academic dishonesty is more likely to occur or be perceived as acceptable. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve a commitment to transparency, fairness, and adherence to established academic regulations. When faced with student inquiries that touch upon the integrity of the assessment, professionals should 1. Consult the official examination guidelines and policies of Addis College. 2. Provide clear, unambiguous information about what is permitted and prohibited during the exam. 3. Emphasize the importance of individual effort and academic honesty. 4. Avoid any actions that could be interpreted as facilitating or condoning academic misconduct. 5. Seek clarification from higher authorities within the institution if the situation is complex or ambiguous. Question 10. Performance analysis shows a significant variance in the scores of candidates who took the Addis College entrance exam in the previous cycle. An administrator has access to the raw, anonymized performance data for all candidates and is considering conducting an immediate, in-depth analysis to identify potential contributing factors to this variance before the official results are released. Option A. Initiate an immediate, unauthorized deep dive into the raw performance data to identify specific candidate profiles exhibiting unusual score patterns, without waiting for official clearance. Option B. Conduct a detailed analysis of the anonymized performance data using authorized statistical tools and report findings through the designated official channels for review by the examination board. Option C. Immediately share the anonymized performance data with a trusted colleague outside the examination board to get a second opinion on the observed score variances. Option D. Access the raw performance data and perform an independent analysis, then present preliminary findings to a group of senior faculty members to solicit their insights. The correct answer is B. Conduct a detailed analysis of the anonymized performance data using authorized statistical tools and report findings through the designated official channels for review by the examination board. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data. The Addis College entrance exam framework emphasizes integrity and responsible data handling. Careful judgment is required to avoid actions that could compromise the exam's fairness or violate established guidelines. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to the established protocol for handling exam-related performance data. This means utilizing only authorized channels and reporting mechanisms for any analysis or dissemination of results. This aligns with the principles of data security and integrity mandated by the Addis College entrance exam regulations, which aim to ensure a fair and unbiased assessment process. Unauthorized access or analysis of raw performance data before official release would constitute a breach of these regulations. An incorrect approach would be to attempt to access or analyze raw performance data directly from the examination system without proper authorization. This action would violate the confidentiality and security protocols designed to protect the integrity of the entrance exam. It could lead to premature disclosure of results, potential manipulation, or unfair advantages, all of which are strictly prohibited by the Addis College entrance exam's ethical guidelines. Another incorrect approach would be to discuss preliminary performance observations with unauthorized individuals or in an informal setting. This constitutes a breach of confidentiality and could lead to the spread of misinformation or speculation, undermining the credibility of the examination process. The regulations require that all official communications regarding exam performance be channeled through designated authorities and follow established procedures. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the relevant regulations and ethical codes governing the examination process. Professionals must prioritize adherence to established protocols for data access, analysis, and reporting. When faced with a situation where performance data is available, the first step should be to confirm the authorization and purpose of accessing such data. If the intent is to conduct analysis, it must be done through approved channels and for legitimate, authorized purposes, always respecting confidentiality and data integrity. If there is any doubt about the appropriateness of an action, seeking guidance from a supervisor or the relevant examination authority is paramount. Question 11. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new, potentially faster online proctoring system for the Addis College entrance exam could reduce administrative overhead by 15% and speed up the initial candidate screening process. However, concerns have been raised about the system's reliability in diverse internet conditions common in Ethiopia and its potential for algorithmic bias against certain demographic groups. Considering the paramount importance of fairness and the integrity of the entrance examination process as stipulated by the Addis College entrance exam's regulatory framework, which of the following approaches best addresses this situation? Option A. Conduct a pilot program of the new proctoring system with a small, diverse group of applicants under controlled conditions, rigorously evaluating its performance, fairness, and compliance with all Addis College entrance exam guidelines before any wider rollout. Option B. Implement the new online proctoring system for all applicants, but provide a manual appeal process for any candidate who believes they were unfairly disadvantaged by the system. Option C. Reject the new online proctoring system outright due to the potential for bias and reliability issues, opting to continue with the existing, albeit less efficient, manual proctoring methods. Option D. Immediately adopt the new online proctoring system to realize the cost savings and efficiency gains, assuming that any initial issues can be addressed reactively as they arise. The correct answer is A. Conduct a pilot program of the new proctoring system with a small, diverse group of applicants under controlled conditions, rigorously evaluating its performance, fairness, and compliance with all Addis College entrance exam guidelines before any wider rollout. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the potential benefits of a new initiative against its inherent risks, all within the specific regulatory framework of the Addis College entrance exam. The challenge lies in accurately assessing these risks and ensuring that any decision aligns with the ethical principles and guidelines governing educational admission and student welfare at the college. A thorough risk assessment is crucial to avoid unintended negative consequences, such as compromising the integrity of the entrance exam, unfairly disadvantaging certain student groups, or misallocating valuable college resources. The correct approach involves a systematic and comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes student fairness, academic integrity, and adherence to the Addis College entrance exam's established protocols. This approach would involve identifying potential risks, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and developing mitigation strategies. Specifically, would require consulting the official guidelines and regulations of the Addis College entrance exam to ensure that any proposed changes or decisions are compliant. The ethical justification stems from the duty of care owed to prospective students and the college's commitment to maintaining a fair and transparent admissions process. This aligns with the core principles of educational governance, which emphasize equity and the pursuit of academic excellence. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the initiative without a proper risk assessment, or to conduct a superficial one that overlooks critical factors. For instance, focusing solely on the potential cost savings without adequately considering the impact on exam security or the fairness of the assessment would be a regulatory and ethical failure. This would violate the spirit of the Addis College entrance exam regulations, which are designed to ensure a level playing field for all applicants. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on anecdotal evidence or personal opinions rather than objective data and established risk assessment methodologies. This demonstrates a lack of professional diligence and a disregard for the systematic processes required to safeguard the integrity of the entrance examination. Such an approach could lead to decisions that are not only non-compliant, but also detrimental to the college's reputation and the trust placed in its admissions process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the objective and scope of the initiative. Second, identify all potential risks, categorizing them by type, e.g., operational, reputational, financial, ethical. Third, assess the likelihood and potential impact of each identified risk. Fourth, develop and evaluate mitigation strategies for high-priority risks. Fifth, document the entire process and the rationale for the final decision. Finally, ensure that the decision is reviewed and approved by relevant stakeholders, and that it demonstrably aligns with the regulatory framework of the Addis College entrance exam and its ethical imperatives. Question 12. Stakeholder feedback indicates concerns about potential inconsistencies in the difficulty and fairness of the upcoming Addis College entrance exam across different examination centers. As the admissions committee member responsible for exam integrity, which approach to risk assessment is most appropriate to address these concerns? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment by identifying potential threats to exam fairness and consistency, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and developing mitigation strategies in consultation with examination center administrators and faculty. Option B. Immediately implement a standardized scoring system across all centers without further investigation, assuming the feedback is a general concern rather than a specific, actionable risk. Option C. Prioritize the development of new exam questions for future assessments, deferring any immediate action on the current exam's potential inconsistencies. Option D. Focus solely on gathering more anecdotal evidence from students about their perceived exam difficulty at each center to confirm the feedback. Correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment by identifying potential threats to exam fairness and consistency, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and developing mitigation strategies in consultation with examination center administrators and faculty. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data and ensure fair assessment processes. The Addis College entrance exam framework, while not explicitly detailed here, implicitly mandates integrity and fairness in its admissions procedures. A risk assessment approach is crucial to identify potential threats to these principles and to implement safeguards. The correct approach involves a systematic evaluation of potential risks to the integrity of the entrance exam, considering various stakeholder perspectives and potential vulnerabilities. This aligns with the general principles of good governance and risk management expected in educational institutions. Specifically, it requires identifying what could go wrong, assessing the likelihood and impact of those events, and then developing mitigation strategies. This proactive stance is ethically sound as it aims to prevent harm, uphold fairness, and maintain the credibility of the examination process. Regulatory compliance, even if not explicitly detailed, would generally support such a structured and responsible approach to managing potential exam irregularities. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate data collection without considering the implications for fairness or privacy would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to biased assessments or breaches of confidentiality, violating fundamental ethical principles and potentially contravening implicit or explicit regulations governing student admissions and data handling. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness in risk identification would fail to adequately address potential threats. This could leave the examination process vulnerable to manipulation or error, undermining its validity and fairness. A third incorrect approach that dismisses stakeholder concerns without proper investigation would be a failure of due diligence and ethical responsibility. Ignoring feedback, especially from those directly involved or affected by the exam, can lead to unaddressed risks and a lack of trust in the admissions process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the objectives of the entrance exam and the relevant ethical and regulatory landscape. This involves actively seeking and considering stakeholder feedback, systematically identifying potential risks to the exam's integrity and fairness, evaluating these risks based on likelihood and impact, and then developing and implementing appropriate mitigation strategies. This process should be iterative and involve ongoing monitoring and review. Question 13. The control framework reveals potential vulnerabilities in the administration of the Addis College entrance exam. Which of the following approaches to risk assessment would best ensure the integrity and fairness of the examination process? Option A. Proactively identifying potential risks related to exam security, invigilation, impartiality, and candidate conduct, and developing mitigation strategies for each. Option B. Concentrating solely on the academic rigor and syllabus coverage of the examination questions. Option C. Focusing primarily on streamlining administrative procedures to minimize the time and resources required for exam delivery. Option D. Concluding that a formal risk assessment is unnecessary due to the straightforward nature of a university entrance exam. The correct answer is A. Proactively identifying potential risks related to exam security, invigilation, impartiality, and candidate conduct, and developing mitigation strategies for each. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for robust risk assessment with the practical constraints of an entrance exam. The challenge lies in identifying potential risks to the integrity and fairness of the Addis College entrance exam process and proposing appropriate mitigation strategies. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between theoretical risks and those that are realistically significant in the context of a university entrance examination. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive identification of potential risks that could compromise the fairness and validity of the entrance exam. This includes considering factors such as the security of examination materials, the impartiality of the examination environment, and the potential for unfair advantages. By focusing on these areas, the approach directly addresses the core purpose of a risk assessment: to anticipate and mitigate threats to the desired outcome, which in this case is a fair and accurate evaluation of candidates' suitability for Addis College. This aligns with the implicit regulatory expectation of any educational institution to conduct its admissions process with integrity and transparency. An approach that focuses solely on the administrative burden of administering the exam is incorrect because it prioritizes operational efficiency over the fundamental principles of fairness and accuracy. While administrative processes are important, they are secondary to ensuring that the exam itself is a valid measure of a candidate's abilities and that the process is free from bias or malpractice. This approach fails to identify and address the substantive risks that could undermine the credibility of the entire admissions process. An approach that concentrates only on the academic content of the exam, without considering the broader context of its administration, is also incorrect. While the content is crucial for assessing knowledge, a risk assessment must extend beyond the syllabus to encompass all factors that could influence the examination's outcome. Ignoring potential risks related to exam security, invigilation, or candidate conduct would leave the process vulnerable to manipulation and unfairness. Finally, an approach that dismisses the need for a formal risk assessment due to the perceived simplicity of the exam is professionally unacceptable. Even seemingly straightforward processes can harbor unforeseen risks. A responsible approach mandates a systematic evaluation, regardless of perceived complexity, to ensure that all potential vulnerabilities are identified and addressed. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a structured approach. First, define the objectives of the process being assessed, in this case, a fair and valid entrance exam. Second, brainstorm potential threats or risks that could prevent the achievement of these objectives. Third, evaluate the likelihood and impact of each identified risk. Fourth, develop and implement mitigation strategies for the most significant risks. Finally, monitor the effectiveness of these strategies and adapt as necessary. This systematic process ensures that all critical aspects are considered, leading to a more robust and defensible outcome. Question 14. The performance metrics show a slight but consistent dip in the average score for a specific section of the Addis College entrance exam over the past 3 administrations, alongside an increase in the number of students reporting technical difficulties during the online proctoring of that same section. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation within the regulatory framework of the Addis College entrance exam? Option A. Attribute the performance dip to a general decline in student preparedness and recommend a broader curriculum overhaul for secondary schools. Option B. Ignore the slight dip in scores, assuming it is within acceptable statistical variation, and focus resources on other sections of the exam. Option C. Conduct a detailed review of the questions in the affected section for clarity and relevance, and investigate the reported technical difficulties to identify common patterns and potential solutions. Option D. Immediately adjust the passing score downwards to account for the observed performance dip and reassure prospective students. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed review of the questions in the affected section for clarity and relevance, and investigate the reported technical difficulties to identify common patterns and potential solutions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need to identify and mitigate potential risks with the imperative to adhere to the specific regulatory framework governing the Addis College entrance exam. The core difficulty lies in interpreting performance data to proactively address issues without overreacting or making assumptions that are not supported by the established guidelines. Careful judgment is needed to distinguish between normal statistical variation and genuine indicators of systemic problems that require intervention. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based assessment of the performance metrics against the established benchmarks and guidelines for the Addis College entrance exam. This approach is right because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the exam's objectives and the expected performance levels. It aligns with the ethical responsibility to ensure the integrity and fairness of the entrance process. By focusing on identifying deviations that could indicate issues with question validity, administration, or student preparation, this method allows for targeted and appropriate interventions, thereby upholding the credibility of the exam as mandated by the Addis College entrance exam's regulatory framework. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate, drastic changes based on a single outlier metric fails to consider the nuances of statistical data and the specific context of the exam. This could lead to unnecessary disruption and potentially unfair adjustments to the exam process, violating the principle of maintaining a stable and predictable assessment environment. Another incorrect approach that dismisses any deviation as insignificant ignores the potential for subtle but important issues to emerge, which could compromise the exam's validity and fairness. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to proactively manage risks as expected under the exam's governance. A third incorrect approach that involves making broad assumptions about student capabilities without empirical evidence from the metrics also represents a failure to adhere to the data-driven requirements of risk assessment within the exam's framework. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the acceptable performance parameters as outlined in the Addis College entrance exam's guidelines. They should then analyze the performance metrics to identify any significant deviations from these parameters. For any identified deviations, the next step is to investigate the root causes, considering factors such as question design, administration procedures, and external influences, all within the scope of the exam's regulations. Based on this investigation, appropriate, proportionate, and evidence-based actions should be determined, always ensuring these actions are consistent with the overarching regulatory framework of the Addis College entrance exam. Question 15. The evaluation methodology shows that the Addis College entrance exam is designed to identify candidates with strong academic potential. An admissions officer is reviewing applications and encounters a candidate with a strong entrance exam score, but a less impressive prior academic record, and another candidate with a slightly lower entrance exam score, but a history of overcoming significant personal challenges to achieve academic success. Which approach best aligns with the principles of a fair and effective risk assessment for university admissions? Option A. Prioritize the candidate with the higher entrance exam score, as this is the primary indicator of academic potential according to the methodology. Option B. Recommend admitting the candidate with the strong entrance exam score and a less impressive prior record, while suggesting the other candidate be considered for a different program with lower entry requirements. Option C. Focus solely on the entrance exam score for both candidates, as this is the standardized measure designed to ensure objectivity. Option D. Conduct a more thorough review of both candidates, considering the entirety of their academic history, demonstrated resilience, and potential for success at the college, to make an informed admission decision. The correct answer is A. Prioritize the candidate with the higher entrance exam score, as this is the primary indicator of academic potential according to the methodology. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an admissions officer to balance the stated goals of the Addis College entrance exam with the practical realities of assessing a diverse applicant pool. The core difficulty lies in interpreting the evaluation methodology to ensure fairness and accuracy without introducing bias or overlooking potential. The Addis College entrance exam, like any university entrance examination, aims to identify candidates with the academic aptitude and potential to succeed in higher education. This requires a robust and ethically sound risk assessment process that considers various factors beyond simple test scores. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that considers multiple facets of an applicant's profile. This includes not only academic performance as indicated by the entrance exam, but also other relevant indicators of potential success, such as prior academic records, demonstrated interest in the chosen field of study, and any extenuating circumstances that might have affected performance. This holistic view aligns with the ethical imperative to provide equal opportunity and to select candidates who are most likely to thrive and contribute to the college community. It also reflects a responsible approach to risk management, aiming to minimize the risk of admitting students who may struggle academically or the risk of overlooking promising candidates who may not have performed optimally on a single test. The regulatory framework for university admissions, while not explicitly detailed here, generally emphasizes fairness, transparency, and the selection of candidates based on merit and potential. An approach that solely relies on the entrance exam score without considering other factors is flawed because it fails to acknowledge the multifaceted nature of academic potential and can lead to the exclusion of otherwise qualified candidates. This represents a failure in risk assessment by oversimplifying the evaluation and potentially misjudging an applicant's true capabilities. An approach that prioritizes applicants with connections or perceived social influence, regardless of their academic merit, is ethically unacceptable and violates the principles of fairness and equal opportunity. This introduces an unacceptable level of bias and undermines the integrity of the admissions process. It is a clear failure in risk assessment as it introduces subjective and irrelevant factors, increasing the risk of admitting unsuitable candidates and rejecting deserving ones. An approach that dismisses any applicant who does not achieve a perfect score on the entrance exam is also a failure in risk assessment. It demonstrates an inflexible and overly narrow interpretation of the evaluation methodology, failing to account for the possibility of minor errors, test anxiety, or other factors that might affect a single performance. This approach increases the risk of rejecting highly capable individuals who might still succeed at the college. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the stated objectives of the entrance exam and the college's admission policies. It requires a commitment to fairness and equity, employing a multidimensional assessment strategy that considers a range of relevant factors. Professionals should be trained to identify and mitigate potential biases and to apply a consistent and transparent evaluation methodology. When faced with ambiguity, seeking clarification from senior admission staff or referring to established guidelines is crucial. Question 16. Investigation of the proposed new Bachelor of Science in Artificial Intelligence program at Addis College reveals several potential areas of concern, Which of the following approaches to risk assessment would best align with the principles of responsible academic program development and institutional integrity? Option A. Conducting a comprehensive review encompassing academic quality, faculty expertise, resource availability, financial viability, and potential reputational impact. Option B. Prioritizing an assessment that focuses exclusively on the potential for high student enrollment and subsequent tuition revenue. Option C. Evaluating only the immediate operational costs associated with launching the program, without considering long-term sustainability or market demand. Option D. Limiting the assessment to identifying potential academic challenges, such as curriculum relevance and student learning outcomes. The correct answer is B. Prioritizing an assessment that focuses exclusively on the potential for high student enrollment and subsequent tuition revenue. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the applicant to identify potential risks associated with a new academic program before its launch. The Addis College Entrance Exam Framework, while not explicitly detailed here, generally emphasize a proactive and responsible approach to academic planning. The challenge lies in discerning which risk assessment approach is most aligned with principles of sound academic governance and student welfare, which are implicit in any reputable educational institution's entrance exam standards. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of all potential risks, encompassing academic, financial, operational, and reputational aspects. This holistic perspective is crucial for ensuring the program's viability and the college's integrity. Regulatory frameworks for educational institutions typically mandate thorough due diligence and risk mitigation planning before introducing new initiatives. This approach aligns with the ethical obligation to provide high-quality education and to safeguard institutional resources and reputation. An approach that focuses solely on immediate financial gains overlooks significant operational and academic risks, potentially leading to program failure and reputational damage. This is ethically unsound as it prioritizes profit over educational quality and student experience. Another incorrect approach, which ignores potential reputational risks, fails to acknowledge the interconnectedness of academic success and public perception. A strong reputation is vital for attracting quality students and faculty, and neglecting this aspect can have long-term detrimental effects. Finally, an approach that only considers academic risks, while important, is incomplete. A comprehensive risk assessment must also address financial sustainability and operational feasibility to ensure the program can be delivered effectively and efficiently. Professionals in academic planning should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with identifying all potential stakeholders and their interests. This is followed by a systematic identification of all foreseeable risks across various domains. Each identified risk should then be analyzed for its likelihood and potential impact. Based on this analysis, mitigation strategies should be developed, and a plan for ongoing monitoring and review should be established. This systematic and comprehensive approach ensures that decisions are informed, responsible, and aligned with institutional goals and ethical standards. Question 17. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new, less secure but cheaper method for verifying applicant identities for the Addis College entrance exam could save the college a significant amount of money annually. However, this new method has a higher risk of allowing fraudulent applications to proceed undetected. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the Addis College administration? Option A. Adopt the new identity verification method, but simultaneously increase the number of proctors during the exam to mitigate the risks of fraudulent applications. Option B. Proceed with the new identity verification method, but only after conducting a more detailed cost-benefit analysis that attempts to quantify the potential costs of fraud. Option C. Implement the new identity verification method to realize the cost savings, and then address any potential issues of fraudulent applications as they arise. Option D. Reject the new identity verification method due to the unacceptable risk it poses to the integrity of the entrance examination and its potential to violate the regulatory framework governing fair admissions. The correct answer is D. Reject the new identity verification method due to the unacceptable risk it poses to the integrity of the entrance examination and its potential to violate the regulatory framework governing fair admissions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing potential financial benefits against the ethical and regulatory obligations to ensure the integrity of the admissions process. The Addis College entrance exam framework emphasizes fairness, transparency, and the prevention of undue influence. A cost-benefit analysis, while a common business tool, must be applied within these strict ethical and regulatory boundaries. The challenge lies in recognizing that certain costs, such as reputational damage or the erosion of public trust, are not easily quantifiable, but are paramount in an educational institution. The correct approach involves prioritizing the integrity of the entrance exam and adhering strictly to the established regulatory framework of the Addis College entrance exam. This means that any proposed change or deviation, even if seemingly cost-effective, must first be evaluated against its potential impact on fairness, equity, and the established examination procedures. The regulatory framework for university entrance exams in Ethiopia, as it pertains to Addis College, mandates a rigorous and impartial selection process. Therefore, any action that could compromise this impartiality, regardless of potential cost savings, is unacceptable. The ethical imperative is to uphold the trust placed in the college by prospective students, their families, and society at large. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the quantifiable cost savings identified in the cost-benefit analysis, without adequately considering the qualitative risks to the exam's integrity. This demonstrates a failure to understand the fundamental purpose of an entrance examination, which is to provide a fair and objective measure of a candidate's aptitude and readiness for higher education. Such an approach risks violating the spirit, if not the letter, of the Addis College entrance exam regulations, which are designed to prevent any form of bias or unfair advantage. Another incorrect approach would be to implement changes based on the cost-benefit analysis, without seeking proper authorization or consultation with the relevant examination oversight bodies within Addis College. This bypasses established governance structures and could lead to the adoption of practices that are not in line with the college's overall mission or regulatory requirements. It shows a disregard for procedural correctness and institutional accountability. A third incorrect approach would be to dismiss the cost-benefit analysis entirely without proper consideration. While the primary focus must be on integrity, a complete disregard for potential efficiencies could lead to suboptimal resource allocation. However, the fundamental error here is not the dismissal itself, but the failure to engage in a balanced assessment where cost-benefit considerations are weighed against, and subordinate to, the non-negotiable principles of exam integrity and regulatory compliance. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a multifaceted evaluation. First, clearly identify the core objective, maintaining the integrity and fairness of the Addis College entrance exam. Second, assess any proposed changes or initiatives against this core objective and the specific regulations governing the exam. Third, if a cost-benefit analysis is conducted, ensure that all potential costs, including reputational and ethical costs, are considered alongside financial ones. Fourth, consult with relevant stakeholders and oversight committees to ensure compliance and ethical alignment. Finally, prioritize regulatory adherence and ethical considerations above all else, even if it means foregoing potential financial benefits. Question 18. Operational review demonstrates that the admissions department has been expediting applicant data processing by bypassing certain standard verification checks to meet tight enrollment deadlines. This has led to a few instances of incomplete applicant files being processed, which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework for university entrance exams in ensuring both efficiency and compliance. Option A. Implement a formal risk assessment process to identify potential vulnerabilities in the expedited data processing, develop mitigation strategies for incomplete files, and revise operational procedures to incorporate these controls without significantly impacting deadlines. Option B. Focus solely on improving the speed of the existing verification checks without formally assessing the risks associated with incomplete files or the impact of potential errors. Option C. Continue with the expedited processing, assuming that the instances of incomplete files are minor and unlikely to cause significant issues, and address any problems as they arise. Option D. Immediately halt all expedited processing and revert to the original, slower verification methods to ensure absolute adherence to all historical procedures, even if it means missing enrollment targets. The correct answer is A. Implement a formal risk assessment process to identify potential vulnerabilities in the expedited data processing, develop mitigation strategies for incomplete files, and revise operational procedures to incorporate these controls without significantly impacting deadlines. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the need to maintain operational efficiency and the imperative to adhere to regulatory requirements for risk assessment. The college's entrance exam framework, while not explicitly detailed here, would typically mandate a structured and documented approach to identifying, evaluating, and mitigating risks associated with its admissions process. The challenge lies in balancing the speed required for timely admissions with the thoroughness demanded by regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented risk assessment process that integrates with the operational workflow. This means proactively identifying potential risks, e.g., data breaches, biased assessment criteria, procedural errors, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and establishing clear mitigation strategies. This approach is justified by the overarching regulatory framework for educational institutions, which emphasizes fairness, integrity, and the protection of applicant data. Adhering to such a framework ensures that the admissions process is not only efficient, but also robust, transparent, and compliant, thereby safeguarding the college's reputation and the trust of its applicants. An approach that bypasses formal risk assessment in favor of ad hoc problem-solving is ethically and regulatorily unsound. This failure stems from a lack of proactive risk identification and mitigation, potentially leading to unforeseen consequences that could compromise the integrity of the admissions process. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on immediate operational concerns without considering the broader risk landscape, neglects the systematic requirements of regulatory compliance. This can result in a failure to address systemic vulnerabilities that could have significant long-term repercussions. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or past practices without formal validation fails to meet the standards of a documented and auditable risk management system, which is a cornerstone of regulatory compliance in educational admissions. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a risk-based approach. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulatory expectations for risk assessment in the context of college admissions. 2. Identifying all potential risks associated with the operational review findings. 3. Evaluating these risks based on likelihood and impact. 4. Developing and documenting appropriate mitigation and control measures. And 5. Establishing a process for ongoing monitoring and review of these risks and controls. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with both operational needs and regulatory mandates. Question 19. When evaluating potential funding sources to address an immediate budget deficit, what is the most prudent and ethically sound approach for Addis College to adopt? Option A. Seek funding from sources that offer the most favorable immediate interest rates without investigating the lender's background or the potential for future undisclosed fees. Option B. Prioritize securing the largest and fastest available funding, regardless of the source or associated terms, to immediately alleviate the budget shortfall. Option C. Focus on funding options that are most likely to generate positive public relations in the short term, even if they do not fully address the underlying financial issues. Option D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment of each funding option, considering potential impacts on the college's reputation, operational integrity, and long-term financial stability, and develop mitigation strategies accordingly. Correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment of each funding option, considering potential impacts on the college's reputation, operational integrity, and long-term financial stability, and develop mitigation strategies accordingly. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for financial resources with the long-term sustainability and ethical obligations of the institution. The college, like any educational body, has a duty to its students, staff, and stakeholders to operate responsibly and maintain its reputation. Making decisions solely based on immediate financial pressure without considering potential risks can lead to significant reputational damage, loss of public trust, and even legal repercussions. Careful judgment is required to identify and mitigate these risks effectively. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that systematically identifies potential threats to the college's objectives, analyzes their likelihood and impact, and develops appropriate responses. This aligns with principles of good governance and prudent financial management expected of educational institutions. Specifically, it requires a structured process to understand what could go wrong, how likely it is to happen, and what the consequences would be. This proactive stance allows for informed decision-making, enabling the college to allocate resources effectively to manage or avoid risks, thereby safeguarding its future and fulfilling its mission. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes the long-term well-being of the institution and its stakeholders over short-term expediency. An approach that focuses solely on securing the quickest and largest immediate funding source without due diligence fails to acknowledge the potential for hidden liabilities or unsustainable terms associated with such funding. This could lead to future financial distress or compromise the college's operational independence. Another incorrect approach, which involves ignoring potential negative publicity or public perception, is ethically flawed as it disregards the importance of transparency and accountability to the community the college serves. Reputational damage can have severe and long-lasting consequences, impacting enrollment, donor relations, and staff morale. Finally, an approach that prioritizes short-term gains without considering the impact on the quality of education or student experience is fundamentally at odds with the core mission of a college and represents a failure of ethical responsibility towards its students. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the objectives and the context of the decision. This should be followed by a thorough identification of all potential risks associated with each option, considering financial, operational, reputational, and ethical dimensions. Each identified risk should then be analyzed for its likelihood and potential impact. Based on this analysis, mitigation strategies should be developed, and the options should be evaluated not just on their immediate benefits, but also on their long-term implications and alignment with the institution's values and strategic goals. This systematic and holistic evaluation ensures that decisions are well-informed, responsible, and ethically defensible. Question 20. Governance review demonstrates that a significant potential donor, whose company has recently faced public scrutiny for questionable labor practices, has offered a substantial financial contribution to Addis College. The college leadership is eager to accept the funds to support new academic programs. Which of the following represents the most prudent and ethically responsible approach for Addis College? Option A. Accept the donation but stipulate that the funds can only be used for administrative costs, as this is less visible than academic programs. Option B. Proceed with accepting the donation based on the donor's personal assurances that their company's practices are being reformed, without further independent verification. Option C. Immediately accept the donation to secure the much-needed funds for academic programs, assuming the public scrutiny is temporary and will not impact the college. Option D. Conduct a thorough due diligence investigation into the donor's business practices and reputation, assessing potential reputational risks and ensuring alignment with the college's values before accepting the donation. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough due diligence investigation into the donor's business practices and reputation, assessing potential reputational risks and ensuring alignment with the college's values before accepting the donation. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for financial resources with the long-term ethical and regulatory obligations of the college. The pressure to secure funding can lead to overlooking potential risks or engaging in practices that could compromise the institution's integrity and reputation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any fundraising activities align with the Addis College entrance exam's regulatory framework and ethical standards. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough risk assessment before committing to any partnership. This means identifying potential risks associated with the donor's business practices, reputation, and the nature of their contribution. It also involves evaluating whether the proposed partnership aligns with the college's mission and values, and whether it could create conflicts of interest or reputational damage. This approach is ethically sound and aligns with good governance principles, which mandate due diligence and responsible stewardship of institutional resources and reputation. It proactively mitigates potential harm and ensures that decisions are made in the best interest of the college and its stakeholders, adhering to the spirit of the Addis College entrance exam's guidelines on institutional integrity. An incorrect approach would be to immediately accept the donation without any due diligence. This fails to uphold the principle of responsible stewardship and could expose the college to reputational damage if the donor's activities are later found to be unethical or illegal. It also bypasses the necessary risk assessment, which is a fundamental component of sound governance and ethical decision-making within the framework of the Addis College entrance exam. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize the immediate financial benefit over potential ethical concerns. This demonstrates a lack of foresight and a disregard for the long-term implications of accepting funds from a questionable source. It suggests a transactional mindset that can undermine the college's credibility and its commitment to ethical conduct, which are implicitly expected under the Addis College entrance exam's purview. A further incorrect approach would be to proceed with the partnership based solely on the donor's assurances without independent verification. This relies on trust without establishing accountability and leaves the college vulnerable to misrepresentation or undisclosed risks. It neglects the professional obligation to verify information and conduct thorough investigations, which are crucial for maintaining institutional integrity and adhering to the implicit standards of the Addis College entrance exam. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes identifying potential risks, analyzing their likelihood and impact, and developing mitigation strategies. It also requires consulting relevant internal policies and external regulations, seeking advice from legal and ethical experts, and ensuring transparency in the decision-making process. The ultimate decision should be based on a comprehensive evaluation of how the proposed action aligns with the institution's mission, values, and regulatory obligations, prioritizing long-term sustainability and ethical integrity over short-term gains.